Did you get any sleep?
Here and there. Yeah, a few hours. Okay. So we have a little bit to do today. Let me make sure I share screen because sometimes I forget. We're gonna go through the lecture. This is gonna cover 4 and 5, and then we're gonna talk about we're gonna work on our assignments when we're doing that. So we'll talk about securing networks. We'll focus on some appliances and the features in those appliances. And then we're gonna do a little bit of Kali Linux just to kind of keep up with the Linux command line, and then also we are gonna configure our wireless router today. Some of you have had me for 40A, so you've seen this before. A similar exercise. I just want to make sure that you are capable of doing that. So we'll work with the physical device. I put some in the back and some in the front, so y'all can pick and then also share if there's not enough. Okay. All right, so we'll start with chapter 4. This week we're going to talk about security appliance. And you're going to hear these acronyms. And so I want to make sure that you know what they are. There will be time that we will configure some of the security appliance. I have Fortinet and I have a few others, but you can find a lot of the feature also in your wireless router or your normal appliances. Now it has security feature. So when you see the term host, right? That will be the H in front here. HIDS stands for host-based intrusion detection system. Anytime that you hear the term intrusion detection, that is an alarm system. So it's only going to notify you in the case that you have intrusion, right? So like it's like how the alarm would go off in a facility when someone is breaking into that building. So it is usually a software. So when you see host-based, that's a software that's installed, and it just provides the protection for the host itself, that particular computer or that system, right? So it allows it to track or detect potential attacks or critical issues, security issues. So the intrusion detection system, its job is to really look at the traffic that is being received and sent from the host. It also functions as a malware. So if you're using security application on your computer, right, that is beyond anti-malware, you often it's gonna fall into this category. And then it is an extra layer of protection. So on your computer, right, we would have at least a host-based IDS. Internally, if you are running a lot of different critical application, I recommend that you have some kind of application for security to make sure that you protect your system files and your customized files that you have for whatever purpose, right? That could be critical. It also monitor application and protect your local resources, right? So intrusion detection system, its job is just to notify in case something goes wrong. Now, network-based intrusion detection system, your NIDS, this is more on a larger network scope. So this is more common in a business environment or an enterprise environment. You can use it to monitor individual system, but normally we would use this to really look at our network traffic. So in the case, if I have denial of service attack, right? The NIDS is going to sound off the alarm and it's going to tell me someone is attacking, right? So because we are going to look at the anomaly as, let's say that I'm being requested, right? That system is being requested 50,000 times because DOS would do that. And so it's unable to respond. Now the deficiency in NIDS is that it's not able to decrypt traffic. So attackers are very advanced in how they approach the attack. So if they plan out, they say, okay, if they have a lot of monitoring tools, I'm going to launch the attack with encrypted traffic. Now, encrypted traffic, you know that it's going to require processing power and bandwidth, right? So, with that, the NIDS will not see what they are, right? We might see the anomaly coming from the same source of IP many times, but we will not be able to see the payload or the information in the headers if it is encrypted. So that means that the NIDS is good if the traffic is not encrypted, right? If it is very apparent. So when we look at this diagram, right, this is not like the best diagram, but it gives you a bigger picture of how the systems are interconnected. So in this first picture, you have the internet, and then you have a firewall, which is the border firewall here. And you might have sensors and collectors. These are really to be able to gather information for traffic. And then everything is passed into the switch. But you notice that there will be a system, an appliance, right? That is going to be network intrusion detection system here, because before it hits your segment, which is like, sub part of your network, we want to be able to make sure that we screen that, we monitor that traffic. Now, if they can bypass the firewall, because coming in, if I'm the attacker that's from the wild, which is the internet, I have to, number one, bypass the firewall here, right? That is going to be the blocker to the internal traffic here. And then once I get through the firewall, then I'm going to get routed. And once I hit the switch here, then I can get into some of the critical area of the network, right? Maybe some servers or systems that we're looking for. But if the NIDS is doing its job, it's going to sound off as soon as my information is collected and routed, right? So that means that if I'm a clever attacker, once I bypass the firewall, I have to do what? I have to mask myself. I have to impersonate to become part of the then internal network, right? Because I don't want to come in and it's going to sound off again. As soon as I hit the switch, it's going to say, oh, there's an intrusion because I don't recognize the IP address. I don't recognize that MAC address. So I have to make sure that I am with the network, right? So I need to make sure I have the internal IP address and an internal MAC address that is controlled into the port for the switch. You see? Any questions? All right, we'll come back. We'll come to the questions soon. You have to be comfortable looking at these diagrams, because in the security world, right, there's no 100% perfect design, because if there is, we will not have a job. But you're gonna have to take a look at the design and see how the traffic flow and what will be an issue, right? What can be improved with the actual design. So here, this is more of a common design. You're gonna have a DMZ, right? The militarized zone, this is a public facing, we talked about this last time, a public facing area where some of your systems that needs to communicate with the internet traffic. For example, a web server, maybe you're selling products online. You would have a database for your customer information and inventory, your product information. Now with that, you would see a network intrusion detection. You would place an alarm system for this area, right? And it's gonna monitor some activity here. There's gonna be a firewall, right? This is the border firewall for the DMZ side. The router so the firewall is gonna be first. So this is gonna be the first block coming in. So if I'm the attacker coming to here, I have to conquer this, right, in order to get here. And most of the time you see this as an application firewall. If they're using an appliance, right, it's gonna function port filter. You can block traffic. So I can block like, maybe China IP, North Korea IP, and so on this appliance. And it's gonna route the traffic. So if I'm a customer, I'm gonna come in, right? I'm gonna be able to authenticate to my account on the web server side. and then also access, whatever the products that I'm purchasing. And then internally, because we're a corporate, you're gonna have a firewall on the private side, and again, you see a network intrusion detection system multiple times here. Now, if it was me, when I redesign this network, what should I do? What do you think I should do here on this side?
Put a firewall between the DMZ router and
So take this firewall, instead of before the router, place it after the router, right here, right? So on the rack, it's physically gonna be there, but the way that you configure it, you're gonna connect it. So my internet service provider connection is gonna connect directly to the router, and then the firewall is gonna plug into the router, so it's behind the router. Okay, so that's okay, but I'm more concerned on this side, right, the private side. So you see how this router is routed to the critical back-end server? That's your backbone, that's everything your company owns right here, right? So if I bypass this firewall, I come here, open sesame, right? Because I just need to make sure that this doesn't sound off. So if I mask right here, I'm able to access right here. So what I would do is take this, place it behind here, right? Because it needs to make sure that this guy protect that. And then instead of an NIDS here, replace it with an NIPS, right? Because this guy right here, it's supposed to protect whatever that's over here that's very critical, maybe executive systems and so on. So you can have one network intrusion detection system, but this appliance right here, it needs to block. Because if they can bypass the firewall, they need to bypass this, right? If it's an NIPS, it's intrusion prevention system, it's gonna block and it's gonna kick it out. Versus you have two alarm systems, it's gonna sound off here, it's gonna sound off there. Once they're in already. Okay, so you want to be preventative versus just detection is really reaction, right? Like reactive is after the fact. You want to be before it happens. So prevention is always best. Okay, so for one, it says, what are the difference between intrusion detection system and intrusion prevention system? Your IDS versus IPS. Intrusion detection system is used for detection, right? Of attacks, right? A breach, of data leakage. So it is a monitoring system. Yes. Yeah, so firewall filters, right? It blocks. So the firewall's job is to look at the type of traffic that is being sent, either allow or deny, right? The intrusion prevention system functions like that. Sometimes you would see an appliance that will have multiple roles or features. So the intrusion prevention system, I should spell this out for you. Give me a second. Or known as your IPS, so make sure we notice the difference, is used for prevention, right? That means that it beyond just monitoring and screening, it actually is blocking, right? So the difference, the true difference is this. The IDS does not prevent attack, but the IPS does. Okay? So the IPS, intrusion prevention system, prevents attack. So I can set a rule on the IPS, right? Any request that's more than, so if you see the same packets from a source, more than 10 times, block it, right? Because we're afraid of denial of service attack, or 15 times, right? Because you might have like the same computer requesting certain type of traffic, maybe, account cannot be logged in, multiple system is connecting for syncing purposes. So we can use prevention system to prevent attack, whereas IDS does not prevent attack. Okay. So like all security systems, what you see is you are going to have false positive and false negative. What are the difference, right? When you have a false positive, it's going to alert an event that is non-threatening or harmless. So it will sound off even if the event will not harm the system, right? It's like crying wolf, right? That's the analogy, is that it's going to trigger even if the event is non-threatening. Now, false negative, it does not detect attack. Like I mentioned in many of my classes, you rather be in false positive than false negative, because false negative attack will be bypassed. So it will not sense or detect any attack or prevent any attack. So a system that is false negative would have higher, right? Higher impact in that it will not be able to detect any attack and you will be more prone to attack, versus a system that is false positive, where, you know, it will look at everything. It's finicky, right? It's going to look at everything as a threat. Now, we want to be happy medium, but sometimes that's the type of system that we're working with. So you would see, so more on the paranoid side is the false positive, right? False negative is just like ignore. So it's more ignorant to all the attack or all the events that could potentially cause harm. Any question? Okay, so before we talked about the accelerator, we understand the difference between these two. Make sure we know this for this class, final exam and quiz. But you need to make sure you understand the difference. Okay. Okay, I'm going to switch back to notes real quick. So IDS, it talks about the intrusion detection. So sometimes you would see in-band and out-of-band. So the out-of-band, the traffic does not go through the system, right? That means that it's being transferred through an appliance. So for example, earlier you saw the diagram, right? I have the network intrusion detection system connecting to the switch, right? So the traffic doesn't physically pass through that system. But if you look at the diagram, if we force it, let's say, okay, so you see this traffic for the firewall. So if I'm saying in-band for the firewall, that means the traffic gets routed into the firewall and then to the router. You see, that's in-band. But if it's out-of-band, what happens is I take the network intrusion detection system, I connect it to the switch. Okay, so it's indirectly monitoring through the switch, but not through itself. So if I want an in-band, I would place the firewall and then connect it directly into the network intrusion detection system and then the switch, right? So it's really, you have to also think about bottlenecking, right? So it's kind of like this. You know how you're on the 215 freeway or whatever the freeway that you get here to 91, it's always congested because there's always construction, right? So when they are merging 5 lanes into 3, you are bottlenecking into those 3 lanes, right? Because remember that when you have a lot of traffic from both sides, when you funnel it back to one appliance, it becomes a single point of failure, okay? Second, everything funnel backs to one lane. And if this doesn't have high throughput, you're really crawling slow, right? So remember, we have to deal with availability and performance, because if you have customers that's high demand on Black Friday and they're trying to shop and everything is screening and everything is crawling slow, guess what happens? You're going to lose 50% or more of your customers, right? So now on the single point failure side, if this is removed or down, you're done. Okay. I can't have traffic coming in if this is dead, right? Or on this side. Okay. So you have to think about ways, maybe setting up some kind of proxy, Also additionally, appliances to be able to make sure that we divert and have quality of service in our network environment.
Where's the traffic going?
So if I'm visiting your website, it's gonna go this way to the web server, right?
So it starts at the internet and then
Yeah,
goes to.
if I'm just a
the-
customer, if I'm a customer, I open up the browser, that's the internet,
Yeah,
right? I connect to your website, so it's gonna route into your web server. I log in, that's your database,
okay.
okay? Now, on the right side, if I'm the employee, right? And I need to access the database, I'm gonna get from the internal network, pass through, access the critical servers, or getting it routed through the
So
DMZ.
why the firewall and not a NIDS?
Because NIDS doesn't block anything. It's
The-
kind
the
of like,
firewall
would you
does.
want an iron gate or you want a picket fence?
So the.
Or
firewall-
just like a surveillance camera. Surveillance camera doesn't do anything,
Right.
right? But if you have security guards there to be able to block people from coming in and out, yeah, it's more effective.
That
Understand?
makes sense because it's internet. And then you have the business side and the personal side.
Yes, so on, I would redesign this. I would isolate this a little better, but because this, you know. All right, so here it talks about false positive and false negative, right? So here's some example of that. I screenshot that. We talked about in line with the traffic. The traffic must pass through the actual appliance. It's called in-band. And if you have an IPS, an intrusion prevention system that is active, it's considered that is doing its job in blocking attacks. Okay. And an intrusion prevention system, it inspects the packets, the traffic, kind of like the firewall. If you're looking at packet filtering firewall, it does analyze the packet. And then based on the packet detail, it's gonna allow or deny. So similar functionality in that. Okay. Now the outer band, you see this here. Okay. So outer band or the passive IPS, you can put a bunch of NIPs in different places, right? When I taught the bachelor higher level classes, they always throw in appliances, but I gotta tell them, I said, you have to really think about the effectiveness of these because these systems, number one, not cheap. Number two, needs to be maintained. We have to really make sure that it is effective for a certain area, right? So when you see this, you see that they have the two here, right? One after the firewall. And so this is for the public area, which is your DMZ, and then for the internal network, they got one for the SCADA side. You guys know what SCADA system used for? Things like, if you have facility like this where I turn on 15 buildings light at the same time, control air conditioning. You see that in industrial, like if you're looking at Amazon or a facility that's very large, nobody runs from one room to the other to turn stuff on. Everything's controlled through the main controller for SCADA. But SCADA can be used for a lot of different things. So what you can do, and why is it needs to be protected? Because this is your resources, right? If it could relate it to your power system and a lot of different things. So if someone breached that, they turn that off, you're in trouble. If there's no AC, electricity, yes.
So, sorry, when the IPS is looking at packets and it's analyzing packets, is it analyzing the data itself within the packet? Or is it
Also-
just looking at
Also the header.
the header?
Yeah, so
What
it,
if it's encrypted? What if it's something it can't see?
so IPS does do the decryption, right? The IDS, the detection system, doesn't. So if I put the NID and IDS here, then it doesn't really, it just looked at, oh, pass it or sound off, like, oh no, we have intrusion,
How
right?
does it know what kind of key the package has? It doesn't know if it's like, what if it's an encryption, the IPS doesn't? It's a. I mean, cause.
Like, okay, so, so you're saying if it's like encrypted traffic? So a lot of times with packets, there's only so many types, right? A stream-based encryption, which is your web, like TLS, SSL. That is coming in with port 443, so it's gonna tie that to a specific port. If it is, so a lot of the times, if they encrypt the data, which is the payload, it has to arrive in multiple packets. And somewhere in that packet, there's some key information because,
Okay,
yeah, you, even if you're looking at public key infrastructure, the public key is still being shared. But all the stream, web-based encryption, if you guys are using HTTPS, all of that uses shared key. Okay, I know that it doesn't sound very safe, but that's the fastest way that we can actually convert data into something that's not readable quickly for the web. So shared key, there should be one packet or multiple packet that would carry some key information that's being exchanged. Yes.
So for this structure specifically, is this more about, because like, so for, let's say we're like an employee of this, service, you're trying to access the network or private IPs. So that more so suggests you have like the firewall and then the NIPS is something separate. So is that like two ways that they could block an authorization into the network?
Yeah, so if I'm remotely working at home, right, that's common now. I have to authenticate through the firewall as an employee, right? And then I would be able to connect to all my server system. You see the intra-LAN, and also like maybe the SCADA network. Maybe I'm a facility manager and I want to, maybe someone called me and said, oh, air conditioning is down in this building. I want to be able to log in with my laptop. And so as long as I can authenticate through the firewall, right, it's gonna see my request because I am an employee. When with that remote session, I'm gonna get an internal IP address, it's gonna allow me to connect. Right? So if I'm an attacker, to get through it, I have to tackle the firewall just like the regular person, the regular employee. And I gotta make sure that I bypass the IPX. So it is, you're correct, it is an additional preventative step to protection, right? But so the question comes up, right? Like a lot of my former students, they're like, why can't we throw in 10 more, right? So what happens is you, like I said before, when you have a lot of traffic, you're gonna have to funnel this down to specific systems to screen, right? So if imagine if there's 50 people asking you for approval at one point, right? You're gonna get really busy and stagnant. You're gonna get, overwhelmed.
can you break an IPS like that?
Sure. Just like anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, any system can be broken with overwhelm. Yep. So, and that's how they break some firewall, actually. Okay. Any other questions regarding this diagram? So you guys think about like the type of network design you want to integrate. And it's really important to get used to looking at these things and see, oh, it's like designing a house, right? There's no perfect house. It's just gonna be like the best functionality and the best protection. Yes.
We don't have to, firewall is not working to get to the database server,
Right. If I go to my work, no, I just log in and I'm already authenticated to my authentication system
And
inside.
is that like easier availability to the employees?
Yeah. But there are different ways to really address that, right? But based on this, because a lot of us, we don't get to choose the redesign of the network. We're just gonna work with what they currently have and then possibly maybe restructure some of the things or reconfigure some of the things to kind of make it a lot faster or a lot more secure. That's it. Right? And you do see some of the other roles that we mentioned before, like certificate authority here. Like for the web server, that will be for credential based for the web and also session, and then your mail server. And so the DMZ side is over here. So they have 3 firewall. They have one on the DMZ, one on the private, and then one in between. Okay. The next part is on the SSL TLS accelerator. This is your hardware device. And it's mostly handling your TLS traffic, which is your encrypted traffic for HTTPS, right? And so it tells you right here that you need to place it as close as possible to related devices. So that means that I need to maybe look at how I would place it near the web server or maybe through the area for the DMZ, and it manage encryption keys for secure session. So your session IDs and your encryption keys. Okay, so let's come back to our questions here. So for 3, it says when do we use SSL TLS accelerator? Whenever that you are using TLS traffic, I'm gonna put HTTPS, okay? So whenever that you see that, when you type in the URL, likely that it's using SSL TLS, right? That's all it is we use really for HTTPS. And in that we use encrypted traffic, okay? Encrypted web traffic, so encryption for web encrypts 1 bit at a time, okay? Because it makes more sense to do a stream encryption with the shared key out of convenience and response, right? It's faster, it's because you don't, the data for the web is variable. It's changes from one user to the next. If you're doing blockchain or something a lot more like block-based or chunk-based encryption, that's if you understand like what kind of data that you normally handle. So if I understand that, oh, normally my users would use maybe 512 megabyte of data for most part, right? That's the average. Then I can think about the encryption type and maybe something that is more feasible for that type of transfer and data. But when you have data in motion, especially for web, it's so varied, right? From one company to the next and so on. So the implementation for web is going to be stream-based bit by bit encryption. And so that means that you would need to use the encryption accelerator, SSL TLS accelerator, and you want to place it closest to the device that's handling it. So your web servers, some of your DMZ, network systems and security appliances. Any question? Now, honeypot can be used to analyze your attack traffic. Like we can gather some data about who's attacking us potentially, because it's basically a fake target, right? You are building a fake target to lure the attacker, or you can use it to divert your traffic, your target to someone else, to somewhere else, right? So let's say your critical system, you do not want to put your honeypot there, right? Nobody wants to do that. We want to put it away from that, somewhere farther, somewhere that is, and we want to have more protection in our critical system. So honeypot is a way that we can understand, right, the type of threat that will impact us. So as cybersecurity analysts, most of you will be pursuing that. You would need to possibly be able to do that. Now, my advice for you is when you set up honeypot, be ready to conquer, right? Because, in my opinion, anything is network can be reached, okay, in time. So it's about resource and time, right? We talked about that. Virtual machine is connected to the host. You can do a sprawl, right? Before in the early 2000s, I've seen a video of a guy setting up virtual machine, trying to lure the scammer into that used to work back then, right? People are more clever. They research the material and they would be like, oh, if I can connect to that port, then I can reach the appliance. And if I can reach the appliance is connected to another appliance. So you have to be really careful about how you're placing your honeypot, and you need to thoroughly plan it out. Yes.
Is there such thing as a stand your ground law or something like that? Let's say I wanted my honeypot file to actually contain a payload to create a reverse shell on their machine or something. Let's say, is that legal?
So, ethically, no, right? We do not attack the attack. That is something that is, I've been taught that and I'm gonna teach you that, right? We don't retaliate that way. Even if you've been breached by the same attacker before, right? That is just not an ethic way to do things. Now, but there are some gray areas and some professionals and firms that they can confirm, right? People, as you can see with like attack map, they attack back, right? So, and some of their reason is to analyze what kind of tools and skill sets that they would have, right? So there are cause and effect in all of these approaches. Can you place something there to be harmful? Not advice, but has it happened before? Yes.
I mean, technically, it's just a file on your computer until somebody takes it.
Right. Because, yeah, I understand.
right?
But you have to kind of know your role too. If you're just a pen tester to really look at like the holes in the network and fixing the holes in the network, sure, right? And then there are purple team people who are kind of like in the gray area, and then there's full red team people. But if you're looking at like the red hat hacker, a lot of the times they don't have to really like, I'm gonna get you, right? To really cause any kind of harm to the other. They do it so that way they can learn the tactics and trying to have more preventative measures. So in that sense, like, we kind of have to kind of look at like how far can we cross that line without being unethical, because that can also legally impact you. They can come back and they can sue you, right? For like damaging their servers and their networks and their resources and their people, and then it becomes a huge ordeal. So, but there are possible professional that works in that area, and then you can shift that risk and liability to them by just contracting them. But I see what you're saying. It is very tempting, right?
Yeah.
And say that this is what you get for entering my network, right? I will lock your computer. But that's not ethical. Okay, so we can place a honey file, right, on the honey net, and we would use an attractive file name to lure them. So for example, right, it's so obvious, password.csv. I would be a little bit more creative with this, but only the ones that are inexperienced and would fall to that. So on that network, sometimes you would simulate like a real network environment. You might want to put a few server rules on there as your honeypot, and then to be able to attach. But they can breach anything from printer to system to anything these days. All right, so before we talked about 6, let's come back. So honeypots and honeynet and honeyfile is here, right? Telemetry, let's talk about this a little bit. So this is a way that we can collect data. It is a centralized way to process data for a better understanding. This is used for a lot of sensor-based system, like if you're looking at your county type of management system, from water to utility to gas drilling to a lot of things. So industrial based type of system or SCADA system. So this term mostly focus on like sensors, right? Sensor data. So let's say that we're looking at like drilling for oil and such. How far is that? And the engineers that work on that. So it's a way that they can gather information and be able to plan and also manage the resources. So what we can do is similar to honeypot and honeynet. There would be a fake version of it where it would have like it would corrupt the data that's sent to the monitoring system, and it can cause the disruption in the system. So this would be like an impact of how using this. Okay.
That's what Stuxnet? Stuxnet?
Yeah. Right. And you know, we made stuck nets. It's been around for a long time, right? The signature of that traced back to USA 4. That was like way back, I want to say 20 something years ago. But you would see that there are some malware that would have signatures similar to this. So, okay, any other questions? Next, we're going to talk about wireless. Okay, so wireless is a very important area, right? I think everybody has a wireless network now or a segment that would have wireless. We can implement a few things, port-based authentication protocol. We can also use endpoints authentication that is connected to a certain access point. We can do that at an enterprise level. Using pre-shared key is not always safe, right? So we want to make sure that we implement the proper approach in how we protect the wireless network. And also looking at the physical of the wireless network and how users are connecting to it, right? How signal is beaconing, you know, there are ways that we can also block and prevent signal in the case if you want to protect a certain segment of the wireless network. For example, like in the hospital, you might have multiple wireless network, one for public where the patients and the visitor would access, and then the other more private wireless network that will be for your physicians and the healthcare provider, right? Like the nurses that needs to document using their tablets and so on. So you can control how that signal is being broadcasted. You can shield the signal by using physical things like mirror and glass and fountains, also distance and also metal plates. So they would install, right? When you walk into a building, right, a lot of the time you see like fountains and things, but many companies, they have their designers strategically place things for reasons, right? Not just for decoration. A lot of us think that it is for decoration, but we can shield or block radio signal that way. We can also control through the virtual local area network, right? Controlling the port that is setting up for the VLAN, that's usually through the switch. So wireless basics, you have access point. Most of you know access point would connect your wireless client. Access point has routing capability, but not all wireless router are access point, right? So APs can act as a router, but not all routers can act as APs, right? You might have many APs inside a large facility or like maybe a campus like this to allow the students and staff and faculty to be able to access. So access point demands is really depending on, you know, geographic expansion or how big you are in the physical area. Okay. The difference between the fat and the thin AP. Fat APs are standalone, intelligent, autonomous AP. You tend to see this sometimes when you are driving out in the highway and the freeway. Sometimes you would often see, if you look up at some of the light poles and stuff on the side of the road, sometimes you see APs with solar panel. So they are autonomous and they are separate from one another. Why do they set up APs like that? Possibly just to be able to track like farming type of community where they would use that AP to be able to have sensors, like for dry and irrigations like water, also like to detect heat and so on. So you do see autonomous AP like that. And then you have the thin AP. This needs to be controlled by a main controller. So when you're looking at a network like our campus, you are using thin AP. They are not standalone and they are grouped together and they're managed by a controller or multiple controllers. Okay. So when you drive downtown, like Riverside or downtown a city or near like core area, you do see a lot of access point for like the city offices, right? Sometimes it's public access as well, that's free. I know Loma Linda created Wi-Fi for the public for a long, long time before Riverside start rolling that. So you do see that they're using thin APs. Okay, any question?
What does the FAST stand for? Is it abbreviation?
No,
or
it's just
something?
it's just a name. Fat
Yeah.
and thin.
Oh.
Fat is exactly that.
I'm trying to get technical.
All right, 6, we talked about how the attacker can cause the disruption in your industrial system using telemetry. That will be using fake or inaccurate telemetry, and they can send corrupted data to the system to cause the disruption. All of the systems that are receiving the data are your sensor system. So if they send, like some kind of erroneous data, right, that could cause your system going into, safety mode or shutdown mode, right? That can cause your system, all the telemetry system to go down. So the difference between your access point and the router, all wireless routers are AP, but not all APs are wireless router. Now, when you buy access point, you do see that there's some access point, they just function as access point. They don't have the routing capability. But if you buy some wireless router, right, you would see that they function as access point. I think that we are so used to seeing things or calling things as access point, but technically in the networking world, they're two separate things. So for your AC devices and router, right? This is what you see with these and also the ones at your home. 802.11ac uses dual band. The bands for the channel width are 20, 40, 80. Just remember you start with 20 and you multiply it by 2 and you would get the frequency for the signal. So 20, 40, 80, and 160. And then again, for the gigahertz, you add 2.4 and 5. So if you technically multiply that by 2, you're gonna range right under 5 gigahertz. Okay. Most of your devices that are wireless function under 2.4 gigahertz, right? Unless it supports AC, then it also have the second band, which is 5G. Now, I know some of you took my networking class. I'm going to repeat this, but I know some of you haven't taken the networking class. So the lower the frequency, the longer the wave in the range. And if you've taken physics, right, you've learned that. So why do a lot more devices are created to use 2.4 band or 2.4 gigahertz? Because this it's a lower frequency, which is easier to incorporate in electronics. Also, the distance wise in receiving that signal is higher. Okay. So if you're looking at like smart TV, smart refrigerator, washer, dryer, thermostat, all of those things, the majority of them, maybe some of them only uses 2.4, even like your wireless cameras and things like that, wireless printer, right? And then some more advanced devices, you pay the extra to be AC, right? Then they also come with 5G. But keep in mind that 5G is higher in frequency. That means that your distance in range, physical distance in range is shorter. Okay. So not all 5G things are great because a lot of my students are like, oh, 5G is great. Yeah, you are going to have higher signal, which gives you higher throughput in data transfer. Hence, you would see that it is stronger in frequency here, right? But technically, if you are looking at distance span, so when you build out a network, a secure network in a very large space, okay, keep in mind that there are two separate bands. So you often see that some of the access point that is farther out in some area from right? Some of the systems that needs it, it often works with the 2.4 gigahertz versus 5. So when you pick up, when you're trying to scan for the AP, you're gonna see that you're only gonna see its name as 2.4 gigs versus the 5G. Okay, understand? Okay. So that means that wireless is prone to a lot of things, right? A lot of times it's a lot easier as a target in the wireless segment of the network. So some of the things that you need to start out right off the bat when you're building the wireless network, you need to make sure that you change the default, right? SSID. That's what's being broadcast and advertised to all the system that needs to connect to it, right? So your access point or your wireless router would say, hey, connect to me. Here I am. This is my name, right? Now, like I mentioned before, in the hospital, we might have a wireless segment that is private. You turn this off, right? So the SSID beaconing, you can turn that off on the private side because you don't want anybody else to connect to it. The devices that needed to connect to it, you already configured. The tablets that the doctors hold, right? The laptops on those, carts or whatever the nurse pushes around, those already been configured, right? They don't need to be connected or reconnected. And if they're down, then they need to be troubleshooted through IT department. Now, on the public side, for the patients and the visitor at the hospital, we would then remove the default configuration. We would allow, right, maybe temporary public access to a certain extent, or we would set up some form of authentication with patient ID or whatever it is that you want to use. A lot of the hospital, they just, allow, but public Wi-Fi, how much should you secure it, right? If you don't secure it very much, you need to make sure that you notify the people that this is public Wi-Fi and you are at risk. You should not be paying your bills or anything like that on here, right? In the case that if you want to protect it a little bit more, then set up authentication for your user so that way you can monitor what they're using and, how they're using your wireless network. Okay, so you can hide SSID, you can change the default password for your access point. You can also change, the IP information. There are a lot of things that you can modify to your wireless device. Now, with that said, we have to think about the antenna for the system. If you're looking at these type of routers, right, there are on the antenna, meaning that they cover. So how good is your router, right? I have a lot of students that ask me sometime when they're taking my networking class, they're like, I have a wireless router at home downstairs and I'm trying to access my stuff upstairs and, my signal is just poor. And I bought an accelerator and signal. So accelerator or amplifier, all that is it takes the signal, repeats the signal, right? And potentially, most of them are supposed to increase the frequency so that way your receiver, your system can see it. But it doesn't work that way. So if you live in a home that has some kind of metal plates or dense construction in between the floor, right, likely that you're not going to get signal. I'm in a home like that, right? So my husband and I, so he's gaming upstairs and all my stuff is downstairs and I'm not relocating my office, right? So I told him, I said, you can buy a signal amplifier. We're not replacing the equipment, or you can just run a cable from stairs downstairs, right? And so that's what we did, which is better, like the wired network. However, your antennas, you would see some devices that have like 5 really big antennas, right? So the antenna really speak to how your signals is received and sent, okay? They are on the antenna, so they are supposed to go 360. But there are ways that you can also control the antenna. Like I said before, what if you don't want certain part of the facility to have the wireless signal? Like because you have MRI machines or when you have like radiation machine that does not work well with other radio signals. Okay. So you can maybe build something to block the signal, or you can control the antenna, how it's sending the signal, right? So that means that you really have to thoughtfully place your mobile devices in where your antenna signals are, okay? And then the ones that don't need your signal, you need to make sure that you prevent that signal from leaking. So I give you this table. You can look at all the standards, right? If you're taking networking certification, even though we don't use some of the older standard, they still ask you a question on that. But if you look, right, 5G has been around since N, okay? That's a good 20 years ago, okay? AC came out, now that's what we're using, and we're moving forward with some of the others. And you would see some of the standards that's going to be passed, and if you're looking at A, that's been around, 5G been around for a long time. It's just, now some of them are compatible that have forward compatibility, and some of them don't, right? Okay. So encryption only started in the G, okay? Or better encryption, I should say. But wireless encryption is questionable anyway. Okay. So here is your channel information. We use 1, 6, and 11 for 2.4. And then for the 40 hertz, you use channel 3 and 11. But on your router, if you set it as auto config, it's going to default to the channel that's available. Okay. There's directional antenna that you can also buy to transmit. There's omnidirectional antenna. If you look at some of the public access point when you drive around the city, right, and you look up at the light or at the light pole, you see them. And you see the antenna and their angle in a certain way. And they usually have like solar panel attached to them now, so they're self-powered. Yeah.
So when you hide your SSID, what is actually happening? I mean, it's
You
not,
just uncheck that box, no SSID beaconing, and nobody, so if I come to your home and I was like, what's your wireless?
but doesn't the wireless access point need to tell the
It's,
things it's connected to that it's like still there?
its job is to broadcast, but you can tell it to stop broadcasting. It doesn't need to broadcast. Right?
It doesn't need to broadcast.
When you uncheck that box, it doesn't broadcast anymore. It
So it's
doesn't.
just receiving?
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's only advertising itself when that function is on, and by default it's on.
Okay,
So when you turn that off, it stops advertising itself to everybody, right? It doesn't broadcast.
is there a way to find out it's there by catching messages to
Right.
it?
Yes.
Okay,
So if I run Wireshark, I will see what that is.
yeah,
Right. That's correct. So that's what they normally do, is to scan your wireless network to see what's going on, see what you're hiding, what kind of system's talking. So the answer to the question that we had earlier, you want it overlapping like this, right? So when you place your access point, we want to thoughtfully place where there's overlap, because so what's wrong with this design, right? I do not want to put anybody sitting here with the wireless device or over here. You see what I mean? These people that's sitting in the corner right here and right here, they're not going to get signal. Okay. So, the fake palm tree that you see, all the cell tower, right? Somebody actually thoughtfully, they look at how the signal span, right, across the town and how it overlaps, right? So if you're driving down the canyon in Moreno Valley and there's a dead spot, right? Because that's the edge of the overlap in your cell tower. Okay. Just like how there's an edge to your wireless signal, right? Span. Now this design, throw it out. No, So if you place the desk over here, the cubicles over here, likely that they're not gonna get signal, right? It's easy for IT to wire because everything goes straight down the line. That's easy, right? But the problem is your employees are not gonna get any kind of signal. Okay, so with that, we would see why we need to think about overlapping the antenna signal. Okay, so the WPA, that's the older encryption that you would see with the older standard. The current one we're using is, there's a newer version, right? WPA 2 is what you see that's integrated with the current device. So WPA, it is susceptible to password crack. Aircrack NG is a common tool that is used to be able to breach wireless network. So if you're using WPA, that's not recommended. I don't think that we have that integrated in the newer devices anymore. There's not an option. Either you use encryption or you don't, right? If you use encryption, the current encryption is what you should be selecting. So basically, it is a stronger protection or stronger encryption. Your key length is longer, right? With WPA 2, it is just harder to crack. Is it breakable? Of course it is, right? Given time and resources, anything can be broken. Okay. Any question regarding encryption? So if you're using PSK at home, which most people do, right? It is an easier way to manage home networks. Yeah.
You see, I thought that it's only 5 gigahertz band. So in this question 8, we have two band, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So it's maybe it's confused.
Yeah, so it's dual band. This is the band, right? The channel width is this. So
2.4 gigahertz not belong to standard AC.
right. But it comes with, no, it actually is part of a standard AC. Look. Oh, you're right, for 5G. But it is backward compatible with N or G. You have to have 2.4, otherwise all your older devices doesn't work.
Yeah. Access phone have two band, but standard only have
Well, one, that's correct, you're right. So what Ty is saying that AC is only standardized as 5G, but because why do I put 2.4 gigahertz there, right? So technically you're only standardized at 5G, that's correct. But in order for all your older devices to work with AC, right? Because what's the point of having a modern device if none of our old stuff connects? We can't replace it. So you have to have 2.4 gigahertz in order to have forward compatibility. You understand?
2.4 gigahertz belong to
G, N, and
and
B. Yeah, because if you only support 5G, only N and A would work with AC. The others won't, right? So when we roll AC, a lot of your devices, maybe older devices still exist with the N, and so they have to have forward compatibility. That's correct. So the industry, they have to make sure that it is working with 2.4 gigahertz, even though it is standardized only at 5G. You're correct, right? But it's still when you set up your network, you see your SSID on both channel width. I mean on both bands, I'm sorry. Okay. And then here, So you do have higher channel compared to what you see only at 40 and 24 for the N. So twice. And quadruple actually. Good point. Any other questions? Let me move 11 down. Some of you are still recording there. Okay. So on the next part, it's gonna talk about PEAP, right, on the wireless network. So this is a feature that we can protect the channels, and you saw the channel 20, 40, 80, and 160 megahertz. It is also a way that we can encapsulate and encrypt. So when we say encapsulates, right, that is a way that we can set up a tunnel, or that is not, it make it not transparent to the communication or eavesdropping. So it's building what's called a tunnel for TLS. That means that we are going to have to set up a certificate authority, a certificate server. And for PEAP, it uses Microsoft Challenge Handshake Authentication Protocol version 2, or known as MS Chat v2. So when you go through the configuration of your wireless systems, you likely would see something like this feature. And just keep in mind that it has enhanced security, that the conversation is encrypted, and it uses tunneling. So in order to implement this, you need to make sure you have appropriate server roles, like certificate server and authentication server accordingly. Any questions? So for the captive portals, you see this when you are using the RCCD network the first time, right? When I try to connect to the wireless network with my laptop or my smartphone, it would require me to open up my web browser and accept, right, the term of use. And that term of use just basically tells you that, you know, you are vulnerable to other things because you're on the public network. You know, try not to use sensitive information while you're on it, et cetera, right? So it is a way for us to implement some kind of acknowledgement to the user, or it forces the user to do, right, a specific action or have a specific process in order to use our wireless network. And you often see this at internet cafe, at college campuses, at, you know, large enterprises where you're trying to connect to the network, or even a public Wi-Fi place, right? They would tell you that you have to accept the term of use so you have to do that through a web browser. So it is called a captive portal. And then for you as a student, in order to access, you have to log in, right? I'm the same. Type in your username and password. So what are some of the common type of attacks? You would see initiation vector attack. This is how they would capture your IV value. Where can I find this information? Someone can run a network monitoring tool on the wireless network, like using Wireshark. They would analyze the packet for that wireless network and try to look for the IV value. That IV value can allow them to use that same value in their own traffic, right? So that's a form of attack for initiation vector. Evil twin attack is to create a false access point that looks like the real one, hence the term evil twin, right? I am not a good twin, I'm an evil twin, meaning that I am the fake access point, and I would lure all the users to my access point to obtain maybe their session information, their authentication through network monitoring, and then kick everybody out or kick the real access point out, right? I mentioned to you before, there are devices like this can be bought for testing purposes in pen testing, like Wi-Fi Pineapple. There are stuff that you can also buy online in different names. So, but simply using a device that looks like a wireless router to do that, right? I should have brought in my Wi-Fi Pineapple. I have it in my office. And then you can do a near field communication wireless attack. This is, when do you use near field? When you use that tap to pay, right? Tap to pay is a near field communication type of technology. Or when you're using like what is it called? AirDrop, right? AirDrop is a near field communication type of technology. When I control my TV with my Android and I can cast from my phone to my TV, that's using NFC. So you tend to have some company like organization or industry like hotel, sometimes they would use NFC to be able to cast to all screen from a laptop showing some kind of advertisement. So using near field communication attack can potentially target those type of devices. And then ultimately you can do signal jamming. So I was highly interested in building some kind of signal jamming devices because I was really upset that my neighbors keep flying drones over my house for a while, right? And I kept asking them to stop. So I got so mad, I started buying a drone ID and all of these crazy things. But only if you register your drone, the drone ID works. But I did look into like buying a device from China and then, but that you can go to prison for jamming signal, right? Illegally. So I really read like what's happening, so there are great tutorial videos that someone has put together on building these type of things for testing. And he has successfully tested with the drone, right? Like he turns it on and it's sent, because drone either uses wireless signal or laser signal, right? So this is why people said that when you're pointing laser at the drone, sometimes that you can cause a jam in that signal, right? So it is just an interjection in the signal, or if you think about it, right? If jamming a signal is to resend a disruptive type of other signal, right? So, there are multiple ways to be doing that. And there are people who created and sell, right, jamming devices. But if you look into like signal blocking, so if you ever go to a concert or music festival, you notice that when you're trying to stream live, what happens? Or a game, a baseball game or football, they block that, right? Because they're selling their stream or they're streaming, and so they want subscriber to their YouTube channel or whatever, right? Or pay for the stream. So they buy a service that does the jamming, okay? So they have these devices and all these companies that manages it. And I looked into it and it's thousands and millions of dollars business, right? It's amazing. And they also jam drones. So if you want like your facility to be protected, you can pay for the service and they would give you the device to do that. Let's say if you look into like government contracted facility and so on, but without using the government technology and so on. So I went down that rabbit hole, right? And I started reading about all of these technology, and it was really, really interesting because I thought I knew a lot about drone signal, you know, and thinking about like how wireless signal can be controlled by the drone and so on. But yeah, so jamming is also a way that you can interrupt a wireless signal. Any question? Okay, so wireless encryption protocol information is shown there. Pre-shared key, we talked about PS key before. This is often used for home, right? It's not secure. So in a business environment, you should turn it into enterprise mode where you would set up user accounts and all of that. This should be your best options in encryption using AES, right? And for the enterprise mode, you need to make sure that you have some form of authentication server. And then in some cases, if you are integrating remote access, you need to make sure that you have remote server. I know that a lot of textbooks just refer to Radius, but Radius is such an old technology, right? The new way that we call this is RRAS for remote access system. But your PEAP is here, okay? And EAP stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol. This is the old integration. Now we would use protected EAP. And you can also, as we mentioned before, we would use tunnel with TLS. Captive portal information. So wireless, I didn't talk about disassociating the attack. Remember in the Evil Twin, I mentioned that you can kick the users out or you can remove the other twin, right? This is when you remove the users that's on your wireless network. The Wi-Fi Pineapple is so cool. Like it is just Debian Linux in the back. It's embedded Linux. And there's a button at the top. You click it and it just disassociated everybody on it, right? So if you can sit in the car and you can just like turn that thing on. And if you don't like that company, right, the users start to connect to you, and and there's an option for you to scan. Similarly with the Wireshark, and you can start looking at their packets. And then at one point you don't like them, you just click on that button, and everybody just drop off your AP. So that's a disassociation attack, right? And if you want to know where to get Wi-Fi Pineapple. Yeah. They always sell out some of their tools. But you know, they have tremendously gone up in price.
Is it? Can't you just
It's
you can
$20.
build it, right?
Yeah. So I looked into like this. You can probably look into having like a Raspberry Pi, right? And then using the antenna. Probably harder to find the type of antenna would like easily attach to it. But the Mark, I had a Mark 5, but now it's Mark 7. So I had the older model. They also had like the smaller ones. Oh no, they don't. Now they only have the basic, but if you sometimes you would find like the basic and then there's another version. So this can be powered with the power bank, and you can totally do this like, you know, it's completely portable. And so, and if you get the device, it comes with the tutorial that you can download from online. But if you get their book, which is like free with it, it walks you through on all the process. So if you really want to do this for a living, to do like the wireless testing, this is a really good device to kind of get. I'm thinking I'm gonna use that for my ethical hacking class at one point, because I tried to test some wireless lab here and it didn't work for, I was doing like with regular's router and they take out my rogue AP. So I have to think about like other ways to kind of set it up. But you can find like other type of information here, like setting up a rogue AP. Bluetooth attacks is pretty interesting. You start to see more on bluejacking, snarfing, and jugging. And if you use Aircrack NG, it's capable of Bluetooth attacks. And then if you're looking at like Cain Enable or other tools, it also does the same thing. Okay. All right, let's talk about the last two, and then we'll do a little bit of looking up the network. So the type of virtual private networks, right? So you can set up an IP security type of VPNs. Now, doing this at an enterprise level, let's say that I want to use Microsoft Windows. I just install the role for my virtual private network server. I would go through and set it up, right? With that, you need a public IP. I walked this through for my CIS41A class to kind of get it done last year. And because we don't have a public IP set up, it won't complete, we can't complete that lab, but you can have it set up to where your remote access user can use virtual private network to connect to your network. So that way they are more secured, right? You just don't want random connection. You want a protected connection. So everybody tells you to use VPN. Why do we use VPN? Because your traffic is managed and it's not visible to country or people who are blocking you, right? So I was in Vietnam, not this year, but last year, right? And I was using VPN. There's some time that like connection to VPN service. Just got to make sure that you use the appropriate service. So you can do that. And so that way, when you're running your app or your application, you're not being blocked. Because there were times that I was not using VPN on my smartphone and my app was being blocked. So like 2 minutes in, it dropped connection, even though I have global T-Mobile, and it's piggybacking on their mobile network. So what you see is, you see the benefit of VPN, right? Most of the things that you're using on the web, if I use VPN via the web, right? That uses TLS over port 443, which is HTTPS. So you're using encryption based, or you can use direct VPN with OpenVPN infrastructure. So there are multiple variation of the technology that you can integrate. Business-wise, they're going to implement this if they can maintain it, or they can pay for the user to use this. So I would recommend if you're using public network, make sure that you're on VPN, but try not to use public network so much, because when you attach to it, you don't know who's attaching to it, and potentially if there's malware on it, potentially it could spread as well, right? Question?
I always hear a lot of people talking about VPNs being what is it? Like it hides you from almost like a proxy. Like if you wanted to
Yeah.
do something in Russia and you used a VPN, Russia wouldn't know it was you.
Yeah, so you know that China has national firewall, a lot of comments. They are controlling what their users can access, right? Their people. So you can't. So for example, like, the social media that we commonly use here, they cannot use that. They might use WeChat or something else. Same thing with other countries. We all screen, every country screen, right? Like now that you hear from Snowden, but a lot of the times it's very obvious that your things are blocked. Okay, there's certain service they don't want you to use. So using VPN, you can bypass all of that, but you need to connect to the server. So I use VPN, so I would connect to the server, but in some services, it sees me that I'm coming from, I don't know, somewhere in the world like Spain. It would not allow me to connect because it's saying that I'm not trusted, right? So
What is VPN not?
I don't know for that. What do you mean?
I a VPN, does it act in any way like a firewall to like protect me from malicious?
It's just encrypts your traffic.
It's just,
It's a way for you to match your traffic.
and it's
so-
bouncing my traffic to Spain. I'm going from
yes.
here to Spain.
So if you're using their server, right, or if you're using your company's server, your traffic is passing the tunnel, so they cannot scan using a network monitoring tool, and they will not be able to
It's
see.
repackaged, is it repackaged? Like-
Yes, or it would add additional header. So IPsec uses additional header, and when it passes through the tunnel. And
Okay,
then so your payload and your information is being organized in a different way. So that way it's encrypted your data, so you can't, it's not visible.
Okay.
Yeah, so if someone is screening you, they won't be able to see that. Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Talked about earlier with the detection system. So you were saying how the network intrusion detection system cannot encrypt information, the payload that's coming through. When you're using like a VPN, is it kind of similar where like if they don't have a system in place that can like decrypt what your encryption looks like, that's how you're like
Right. Right. So if you're using encrypted traffic, it's not visible. That's correct. And so the only way that they can see you is if they need to decrypt your traffic. And how do they decrypt your traffic? A key. Right? So technology is only effective in how you maintaining its access. So if we don't, so the key is the point to all encryption, right? So if you're using encrypted traffic, how is it managing your key? And so if that key is shared and exchanged somehow, if they capture your key, it's not, right? But VPN, can they impersonate to be you? Sure, right? With the appropriate service and authentication, some VPN requires that you authenticate to a certain device in order to have that session, right? So defeats the purpose of connecting safely if you have to connect somewhere before you get safe, right? So, so you really have to think about the service that you are acquiring. Like I was thinking about like when I was in Vietnam, I had to use some public Wi-Fi at some point, and I have to connect to the public Wi-Fi to connect to my VPN. So I scrapped that service because I cannot get safe but on the public Wi-Fi, it's totally not safe there, right? Like my system, my security software, it was telling me so-and-so was scanning you on this network. So I turned it off. I was like, yeah, let's disable the Wi-Fi signal right now. Not safe. Okay. All right. So let's do an activity together. We're going to open up command prompt. And then what we're going to do is we are going to, so on here, it says right click. And when you look at and select the settings, so you can look at your settings. Sorry, I should do that first. So when you look at your settings in Windows 10 or 11, right, you can go to network and internet. Now, why is this important? Why do we have to go step by step? You probably know how to do this when you troubleshoot your Wi-Fi at home or whatnot. But when you're doing tech support or when you are interviewing, they might ask you these questions, because if you're saying that you took networking class and network security class, they're going to ask you these questions, right? So I would start with Windows settings, and then I'm going to go into network and internet. And how can I see wireless? Here's Wi-Fi, right? As you see, my system, I don't have that on. And if, you have a user who says, oh, I don't have wireless access, right? Let's check to see if it's on, right? So we can toggle this on. We can also, right, if I turn this on, I would be able to see the available network, right? If I turn it off, it won't show me the available network, of course. So I turn it on, I should be able to see the available network. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect to our CCD, which is, we're going to try to connect to that automatically. So we're gonna select our school network. And it might take a little bit to go. Once that's done, right, you have to connect wirelessly in order for this to work, right? Because you're trying to use WLAN. If you do not have wireless connection, this command will not work, okay? Because we are on wireless LAN. Okay, so let's check, right? So it says action needed. Remember we talked about the captive portal. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And okay, that works now. Let's see. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and type in the command for your NetSH. So we're going to do NetSH SEPH WLAN show trace. So it tells me that there is no trace session in progress. So if you have a trace session that's in progress, it's going to show you the details. Let's try NetSH WLAN show all. This allows you to see your wireless information, just like you know how when you go in earlier, look at settings and you look at your adapter and then the available networks, right? This show all the available networks. So if you only have the Windows terminal or command prompt, you can do NetSH show all. That's going to allow you to see all the available networks. Okay. Now, it gives you a little bit of the like category of information that's a little bit different than what you see on the UI, of course, right? It's gonna tell you the type of class, the wireless class, the band and the channel. So it is giving you the detailed information and then it shows you the channel utilization. So the show all command is actually useful when you're looking at like your wireless network performance maybe, or you know, maybe getting some data for the health of your wireless network, but it gives you all the details. Okay.
So why isn't this command working when I put it in?
NetSH WLAN show all, you have to connect to, you have to do the other step. You gotta change your setting to the wireless.
I did.
Okay. Following command was not found. NetSH, you're missing, right? You I think check your command. NetSH WLAN show all. You're missing the wireless LAN, otherwise it doesn't work. So gotta type it. Yay. Type it. Okay, any questions? So we're gonna screenshot it. And then for 18, I think some of you have seen this before, Talos. Go to the website, type in your domain. So this is a good way for us to determine the reputation of a certain domain, right? Some domain you cannot obtain the information. So we are looking at Microsoft.com domain. It would give you web reputation information right here, whether it's trusted or not. Okay. And then also public addresses. You can click on who is, and it would tell you who that domain is registered to. And then the type of email volume that coming in from that domain. If you took my ethical hacking class, right, or you're in that now, you probably have seen this before because we do this for intelligence gathering as well. So you can find information about the host, right? Whether they're trusted or not, some information, more detailed information like public IP of their networks and systems. So you would go through and answer the questions. What is the reputation for the domain? You can see that at the top. So go to the top, right? Is it trusted or not? We see that here. What is the reputation score for the email volume? So look at the email volume information here on the right at the top. How many IP addresses are used to send email to Microsoft? Oh, I keep clicking on the wrong browser. So we can give an approximation, but if you want to count, you can, but there's a lot, right? So email volume history, that will give you there. So it also gives you like percentage information. You're going to click the Who Is tab, and this is the service that we can use to look up the information about that registered domain. Oops. So we're going to click come back here. Who Is tab is right here. You can click that. And it tells you who this is registered to. So do you see this where you can't get some detailed information? It's because they block it, right? There is a security service for some of that. But then you also see that there are there are some of their DNS registered. So any domain that you see out there, it's tied to a DNS. And then they have this information, which is interesting. Okay. Yeah, when they're using Mark Monitor, likely that if you want more information, you have to reach out to that company to obtain the domain information. You see a lot of tech company, they would use something like that. So Who Is going to give you some domain registration information. How many name servers are listed? And what is the status of DNS? Second, we talked about DNS security last time, right? And then we can close the website. So this is a good way to kind of gather some information about your domain. Is it trusted? What kind of servers does it have? DNS servers, what kind of IP? Does it handle emails? How many email servers are used? And so on. And that this could be your own company that you're investigating also, right? Okay, so once we have all the information, save and make sure that you submit your assignments. Any question? Okay, yeah. Yeah, you can. I think that if it continues, there are many. So here, this is 1 to 50, right? Right, yeah. So here it would tell you like there's some that is forward. Let me see if they used to have. Yeah, just give me an approximate, it's fine. I don't expect you to go through like 580 something pages counting all of them up. That's too much, right? So it tells me there's 578 results, so that will be the approximate number of IP that's used, but not all of them have email server or services incorporated, right? So you see here, right? Email reputation, they're all neutral. So if you look at the results, there's 578 IPs that they That's the range that they use, right? Microsoft actually owns more than that for public IP. So the companies that have like the higher range of public IP, you tend to see that they are cloud company. They need that for their server systems, right? So. Okay. Before we go to break, right? So when we come back from break, we're gonna work on the lab. The lab has two components. We're gonna go through the Kali Linux portion, and then we are gonna use your wireless router. You can share with someone that sits next to you, because I don't think I have 30 something, but if there is enough for everybody, you can use your own. And then when you're done, please make sure that the cable and everything gets back in the box, because other classes are using it, not just my class. And then I will put, so if you're sitting in the back table has a container that has them. If you're sitting in the front, I put some right here. Sometimes if they're missing cable or something like that, let me know. I do have some spare internet cable, but you should not have to connect them physically with the cable. We should be able to directly connect them. So you are connected to the network with your Ethernet cable. So you should still have internet to access your assignment. But you can connect to your wireless router with your wireless adapter, just like how I turn mine on and connect it to RCCD. You're gonna connect to it, right? Make sure that you reset before you start and after when you're done. So that way the next student, because if they don't know how to reset, they won't be able to access it. All the information you need is on the sticker of the router for the default login. When you have a lot of the devices on, just keep in mind that they are overlapping. And so sometimes it would kick you out, right? So that happens. And it's just because there's overlapping in channel and signal and all of those things in one area. So just be patient with it. Sometimes you have to turn it on again and then go through the process, but we'll try to get as far as we can today with the lab. I'll let you know. Okay. All right. Let's stop recording.